Hello, my name is Claire Glenn and I work for Homes England. I work in the market engagement team and I will be chairing the session today. I'm delighted to welcome you all to our summer learning programme. This offers a series of knowledge sharing on topics you've told us that are interest to you. Today's event is about how we can create urban spaces that work for women. Next slide, please. So you may have seen earlier this year that Homes England launched our new strategic plan, and as such our mission changed from a housing agency to a housing and regeneration agency. These are our revised strategic objectives, and because you will be getting the slides at the end, I won't go through them all. Most of you will have actually seen the strategic plan, either sent a copy or been invited to go online and get a copy. It's all there if you do want to do that. So what this slide does, it summarises who the local government capacity centre is and the mission of the local government capacity centre. Homes England established the centre following extensive research and consultation with you across local government and with a whole range of other partners to determine where authorities need most support and how this can best be delivered. Next slide, please. So this is going to be our rough agenda for the day. So what I'll do is I will hand over soon to our colleagues at ARUP. Then they will present for about an hour and then we'll have a Q&A session at the end with some polls towards the end as well. So what I'll do now is I'm going to hand over to Kim and Sarah from ARUP to start their session and they will share their slides.
Thank you, Claire. First of all, thank you, Home England, for inviting us to this training session, and I'm so happy to see so many people in this workshop. My name is Sara Candiracci. I'm an associate director at ARUP in the City Planning Design team. I'm based in Italy, Milan. I was in London before moving to Milan for almost 5 years, always with ARUP. I'm ARUP's global leader for social value and equity, and I was the project director for this publication, Cities Alive, Designing Cities that Work for Women, which for me has been one of the highlights of my career in terms of developing it and now also sharing the knowledge that we produce more broadly. So thank you for joining us today. I will allow Kim as well, my colleague Kim Power, to introduce herself, and then we can start with the presentation.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, my name is Kim Power. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a principal urban planner for ARUP. I'm based from Liverpool, and I run our inclusive cities business across North West Yorkshire in the UK. I was also a project manager for the project that we're going to share with you today. And again, complete career highlight. An absolute pleasure to share it with all. Currently 438 of you on the call, which is really exciting for us. Next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So we're going to start with a poll, and we're going to use Menti for that, which might be new for a few people. So all you need to do is there's two options. You can scan the QR code with your phone, which thankfully one good thing that came out of COVID was people now are much more proficient with QR codes. So if you can scan your QR code with your phone, or as it says on the screen, menti.com, if you type that into your browser and then type in the code, the poll will come up. Should come up, and I believe it's been dropped into the chat as well. Yeah, thank you. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to hopefully get that working. What I will say is if you don't want to do either and don't want to participate, no problem at all. We'll talk you through anyway what the findings are, so you won't miss out on any of the learning. And also it is completely anonymous, so we're not going to be asking for names or anything. So Jess, I'm wondering if we pull over the other side. So the first question we're asking you is, where do you live? So thank you, lots of people participating. 22 of you are with me up in the Northwest, that's nice. Keen to know where our others are. Who's the most? London, oh no, Southeast is winning. We've got lots of you in the Southeast. And then London, Yorkshire and Humber, fantastic, so a really nice spread. Thank you. Next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. So this will now pop up, hopefully. Yeah, good. Some dots are forming. So we're asking you which gender you most identify with, just to see how our spread is on the call. So welcome to our 3 non-binary colleagues. It's good to have you join us. Great. A lot of women, but a really good representation of men, actually. I'm pleased to see we do this quite often and there's not as many. So welcome and thank you so much. You are strong allies in this space, I hope. We'll let some more dots come and then we'll move on. I'll write proportions down. I might be jumping on what Sarah is going to say, but it might be a good time just to share that our definition of women is completely intersectional. Sarah will go into details, but our definition is trans, non-binary, inclusive. Great, lots of women, 225. I'll write this down, 63. Thank you, Jess. If we can move on. So now what we're asking you is which of these statements you most relate to, and the results will hopefully show us by the gender that you identify with and then your experiences within spaces. Some of these I'll share quite openly have come from my own experiences as a woman in public spaces, and some of these have come through from our research. So we're asking you to whether or not you consider how you use public transport after dark, if you avoid routes that you perceive as being unsafe, whether you've ever experienced sexism at work, if you found it difficult to access employment because of your gender. So lots of questions to answer and lots of dots whizzing on. That's brilliant. So proportionately, we were more women than men, so more blue dots would be expected. But we had 225 women on the call, 63 men, 3 non-binary people, and one trans woman. Just so you know our proportions. Okay, this is very small on my screen. My eyes are not this good. So lots of men more than women have done none of the above. So much more common if you're a male to have not considered any of these considerations when you're in the public space. And lots of blue crowding going on. So lots of women who consider women and trans non-binary colleagues as well, consider how they use public transport after dark, less of a consideration if you identify as male. Lots of women avoiding routes if they feel unsafe, or parks and public spaces. Often feeling nervous when walking past construction sites, I believe, a common experience. Some men are selecting that as well. I don't think I see a yellow dot on the 207 one. I can't even see what the question is. It's that many dots. Oh, waiting to use the bathroom. Is that what that one says? Yes, very common experience. I've been there many times myself in a long queue for the toilet. Very rarely have I ever seen a male friend or colleague or partner have to queue. Or there might be one yellow dot. Yeah, and this is exactly what we would be expecting to see. Yes, proportionally, we have got more women than men on the call. But even when we've done this with a near 50-50 split, women commonly experience all of these things much more than men do. What's also interesting though, and we touched on intersectionality, but intersectionality among men, I've done this poll with gay men and with black men, and their proportions that they would click on here is higher than those who are white men. So your unique identities and how they combine all shape how you perceive and access public spaces and cities. Thank you, Jess. Any reflections, Sarah?
I think first of all, it's great to see that in this workshop there's quite a good representation of men. So well done for joining us today. Actually, I think it's the first time. So hopefully also by starting to talk about these publications since October, maybe also we we contribute somehow to start creating this awareness. So I'm very happy, actually, and well done also to Homes England for reaching out and for being able to engage such a big number of men. So yeah, congratulations. In terms of the results, it's no surprise. Maybe why we decided to use this poll, because first of all, because we truly believe in the power of learning through play. So one thing is us telling you the statistics. One thing is, in fact, we're going to use Menti across the all the presentation, all the event, the workshop, because you know, is a good way for you trying to answer or showing your preferences is a good way for you also to remember the statistics that we are going to take you through. Through the presentation, because they're quite interesting and sometimes alarming. So it's very important that you keep in mind those data, and also because the presentation, the way we did is very much data driven, because there is a need to create the evidence to then being able to you know, to have the business case or the case for really trying to design cities that work for women, that as a result also work for everyone. But maybe I can start. We can start with the presentation. Then please keep your mobile or, you know, the Menti code next to you, because we're going back to it quite often during this workshop. Maybe let's start with giving you like an overview why, as we decided to do this research in collaboration with the UNDP and the University of Liverpool. I mean, I'm sure we all are aware by the fact that women across the globe, in particular women living in cities, and when we talk about women, as Kim said, we're using an integrated intersectionality approach. So looking at women of different ages, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic conditions. So we know that they are all facing intersectional challenges, which include gender-based discrimination, inequality, violence, poverty, unpaid care work, and also limited control over assets. And these barriers and vulnerabilities, based on our research, we know that they're made worse by global challenges like climate change, rapid urbanizations, wars and conflict, because we know that women are the most affected, for instance, by climate change or forced migration, for instance, or during conflict. We also know, and that's why we decided to do this research, is that the way cities are designed, either by accident or by design, or by, you know, a conscious decision, they frequently add gender inequalities. In fact, the way many cities are built often makes women feel unsafe. They fail to provide for the basic needs, and also they restrict women's social and economic opportunities. So as a result, billions of women around the globe are underserved by the environment which should support them. And we saw that one key issue, there are many, but one key issue is the fact that women are not well represented in private and public decision-making processes. So decisions also in city planning design are mainly taken by men who not necessarily understand what women need. So what are the challenges that women need? Because in many cases, I don't want to generalize, but in many cases, based on our research, the issues, the challenges that women are facing, they are seen as an issue which is related only to women. And in many cases, men are not participating in debates like this, in workshop like this, to learn about their needs. So it's very good for us to see actually that in this case, there is a good representation of men. So we really encourage you here today to read the report, which is public available, with empathy, to share with your colleagues, because what is important is to create allyship between men and women, men in decision-making position, making sure that women's voice are heard, that women are involved in decision-making and planning, so that by doing this, you can inform your decision, your choices for the good of everyone in a more conscious and informed way. Because we know that when cities are designed without considering the diverse needs and insight of women, they can have an impact which is it can be challenging, not only on the lives of women, but also to their families and the society globally. And consider that 50% of the world's population is made up of women. There is clearly an urgent need to remove the gender bias, which is built into our cities. And so we need to improve women's safety, their health, access to education and employment. Next slide, please, Jess. So yeah, so when we started this journey with UNDP, that is like almost 2 years ago when we started, we knew that there is a lot out there in terms of publications, but mainly from the public sector, from like UN organizations or government authorities, which is talking about publication, talking about the challenges that women face also in cities. But what we saw is that sustained effort to address these challenges have struggled to maintain momentum. Maybe there's like a moment in time that the agenda is up there. And so there are like some activities, but then there is not consistency in terms of delivering these activities or this initiative in the long term. Then what we saw is that when there are like interventions or debates or publication talking about women, the main focus is about women's safety and security, which is extremely important. But if we want to address women's safety in city, we need to have an holistic approach, an integrated approach. We need to consider other topics, other aspects of women's needs, which at the moment are currently overlooked. So this is why we decided to join forces with UNDP, University of Liverpool, because we wanted to provide, create the evidence. Our work was driven by 3 main questions. So we wanted to generate, the first one is we wanted to generate the evidence that was not out there regarding the different challenges, opportunities that women of different ages, groups, ethnicities experience in cities around the world. So moving beyond safety and security to really fully understand what are the key challenges and opportunities the experience that they see in cities. The second one, we wanted to really explore the role of the built environment and how through the design and planning of cities, actually we can contribute as practitioners, as city authorities, developers or community groups. How can we contribute in creating safer, more inclusive, nurturing spaces for women around the world? At the same time, we wanted to develop something very practical. When you have a chance to look at this publication, you will see that the way we structure it is a very practical. We identify different strategies, different actions to start implementing today or yesterday by all of you, by city decision makers, practitioners, and so forth. And the intervention, the strategies that we are including, they are focusing not only on spatial interventions, but we also considering the governance elements and also the behavior change, which are also important. So how did we do this publication? First, we wanted to make sure that women's voices were heard and they contributed to shaping this publication. So we did, of course, secondary research, and then we undertook a very much participatory primary research. We spoke with women from all around the world, organized a global survey, which had over 700 responses. And so also we organized co-creation workshops across all continents. And so in this way, we managed to really get a good understanding of what women across the globe, and we analyzed different case studies to really understand what women around the world are facing in terms of challenges and what they see as opportunity to improve their conditions in cities. Next slide, please. So drawing on the research findings, we identify 4 key thematic areas that we use to understand women's challenges, and that you can use to understand women's challenges and opportunity in cities, and thematic areas that can also help you drive your decisions and your interventions. So the first one is about safety and security, no surprise. The second one is about justice and equity. The third one is about health and well-being. And the fourth one is about enrichment and fulfillment. And as you will see in the report, we use these 4 themes to structure the report. So we to structure the challenges that women are facing, and at the same time to present the strategies. And what we think is important is that when if we really want to tackle gender inequality in cities, we cannot just focus on one of these themes. we cannot just focus on safety because it's not work. We have been, government around the world have been focusing on safety of women for the past 20, 30 years, and it's not getting better. It's getting worse. So there's something else we need to do. So what about looking at all these 4 themes using an integrated approach, trying to see how by improving the health and well-being of women, so creating green spaces, actually can also, by doing this, you are actually creating spaces that are safer also for women and for everyone. So it's very important that we look at these 4 themes in an integrated way. So working in silos doesn't work. Really need to, and that the collaboration across stakeholders, focusing on these thematic areas is very important. Now, I will take you through each of these thematic area, and for each theme, we will ask you some questions. So please get ready with your mobile or Menti code. Next slide, please. So before we start with the questions, just to frame why safety and security is so important, it's critical to women quality of life. In fact, the experience or also the fear of danger in the urban space, in the environment, can cause mental and physical stress and can usually impede women's personal well-being, and also in many cases also has a huge impact on their income, because in many cases women have to pay for taking a taxi, for instance, because it's not safe to take public transport. So has a huge impact on different conditions of women living in cities. So please, Jessie, maybe if you want to share the screen with the Mentimeter. Thank you. So here are the questions. The first one is about the UK. So what is the percentage of young women which have experienced sexual harassment in public space?
If I'll jump in, Sarah, this might be one of the most depressing quizzes that you've ever done. Safe to say that we will go on to let you know how we can solve these challenges, so it's not all doom and gloom. But apologies for the slightly depressing quiz questions.
Yeah. Maybe sure. Shall we see the result? Yeah. 97% of young women, basically all young women in the UK, have experienced sexual harassment in public space. So it's quite depressing, but it's alarming. So we really need to act now, because this is unacceptable. So let's move to the next question. So maybe the real question is about, yeah. So maybe we can see the answer, and unfortunately in this question you got it all right. Unfortunately, every 3 days in the UK a woman is killed by a man. The same is happening in Italy, so that's also very depressing. And what I see in Italy, I'm not sure now in the UK, but in many cases is because of is still, even if it was killed, it's still the responsibility of women, because the way it was dressed, the way it was behaving, because maybe had was drunk. So the situation is dramatic. And I think what makes it more dramatic, at least in Italy, is because at the end is always the responsibility of woman, even if it was killed. Is her responsibility, because it was not behaving in the right way. So also there is a lot to do, and this in this case is about education, is about really creating the right education across men, not women. It's not about women to behave, it's men to learn to respect women. So the next question. In Ireland, what percentage of women feel unsafe traveling on public transport after dark?
Sorry if I jump in while people are answering that, just to reflect on some comments in the chat on the previous question. The irony, I believe, in the UK is that you're more likely to be like assaulted or beaten up on a night out if you're male than actually if you're female. But when women are attacked, women are attacked purely because of the fact that of their gender. Whereas often when men are attacked, it's as a result, generally speaking, this is a generalization, it's because of their behavior, whereas it's women just simply because we were born this way.
Okay, I think we can, thanks, Kim, because I cannot read the questions in the chat. So let's see the answer. Yeah, so 50% of women in Ireland feel unsafe traveling on public transport after dark. So it's less than what you thought, but still is like half of the women population in Ireland are not basically feeling safe at night using public transport. As a result, many have to take a taxi. And that has, as I said, a huge impact on their economic condition. Okay, so let's move to the next and final questions. So what percentage of people globally believe it's justified for men to beat their wives? Okay, we can show the results. Yeah, so 25% of people globally believe it's justified for men to beat their wives. Of course, there are in countries where situation is much worse, then it's still very depressing. But unfortunately, in some countries, it is even more depressing than this, where most like 80% of the population justify that. Okay, so we really want, I mean, we thought it's important to discuss, to show you these statistics, because for some people they can be eye-opening, because it's normally, maybe we talk about, a woman is killed, but actually the statistics is not out there, so it's very important. This is a way for really for us as well to create awareness on what is happening. So next slide, please. So what we did in the report, in the publication, we trying to to look at the statistics, but at the same time to trying to find solutions. How can we use the built environment at the same time the governance glue that connects different stakeholders, how we can use governance, how can we use behavior change awareness for addressing safety and security in cities. So we identify 4 key strategies, and for each strategy, as you will see in the report, there are different actions that you can start taking today or in your work. But I'm not going through the actions now, because otherwise it's going to take forever. But all of them are mentioned, are in the report. And as you will see in the report, each action is also supported by a case study. Because things are happening around the world with our positives and are inspiring, they're not happening at scale. So in many cases, as you will see, there are like small interventions that are were implemented. But what makes things change at scale is when there is a commitment from local authorities or national authorities to make this change really become a policy, a practice in our daily work. But now starting from, just to frame this for all the themes that we identify, the 4 themes. But for safety and security, so the 4 strategies that we identify are, first of all, creating safer streets and public space by design. So putting safety at the center of the design process. Providing safer mobility experiences, integrate gender responsiveness in urban climate strategies and plans, and also incorporating virus prevention laws and raise awareness. So these are 4 like strategies that we identified. They are all equally important, and they can be implemented by different stakeholders. And what we saw is that by implementing these strategies, in addition to improving the safety and security of women, we are actually creating many more benefits for everyone. For instance, for women, but also for elderly people, children, men as well. There is like a greater sense of freedom. The moment there is a safer space, people feel that they're free. They can go around freely. There is a reduced fear of crime for everyone. There is an improvement of the mental and physical well-being, and also there is also an increased access to economic opportunities, because maybe people feel safer to move around, to go to long distance, to go to work. And also there is a reduced rates of misogynist behaviors in men and boys. Next slide, please. So I will take you through now 3 case studies that we found quite inspiring on how safety and security has been addressed in different ways in cities around the world. There are many more case studies in the publication, so please take a look at them and get inspired. So the first one comes from Melbourne in Australia, where as ARO we work with the Monash University, and we conducted a research on women negative experience of the city of Melbourne. We use a crowdsourced data from the Free2Be campaign. Free2Be is an app that we developed with Plan International to map the experience that women have in public space. So we use that app to basically identify over 900 safe and unsafe nighttime experiences in the city. And based on this insight, the team identify lighting requirements that can improve the perception of safety in cities. And also we develop a nighttime vulnerability assessment approach, which now we are using at the start of any urban design process to address nighttime spatial inequalities. The second example comes from Singapore, where the government is supporting elderly residents to move around the city safely. So what they did, they basically established a silver zone where there are clear signposting and road markings. They also install flashing LED lights and also on bends and roundabouts to slow down motorists. This, of course, is creating benefits not only for the elderly people, but for women, but for the generation more broadly. The third case study is from Lyon in France, where the government invested 100 million euro to make the transit network nearly fully accessible, allowing basically some like 1.7 million people to use it. So every bus in the network is completely accessible. They have 70% of the bus stops were redesigned for those with limited mobility, and nearly all the trams and stations are also fully accessible. So this is another example of good practice and commitment from the government to make cities' public transport facilities accessible, not only for women, but for everyone. Next slide, please. So now moving to the second theme, which is justice and equity. So just to frame what we mean about justice and equity in this publication, we basically, and in the built environment more broadly, it justice and equity basically refer to several factors, including the governance, so the legal framework, decision-making process, land use policies, and also the availability and accessibility of services and facilities. So the justice and equity is kind of the glue or the infrastructure that is also required from to make cities more equal and just for everyone. So let's go to the poll again. So the first question, in the UK, how much is women's unpaid labour worth to the UK economy? Shall we show the results? So in the UK, it's worth 140 billion pounds to the UK economy, and we know that women continue to take on 3 times as much unpaid care and domestic work as men around the world. Okay, so next slide, please. Next question. So in England and Wales, sexual assault prosecutions have fallen by what percentage over the past 4 years? In percentage is which percentage? What percentage? Yeah, 70% over the past 4 years. So let's move to the next question. And so, and across the EU, women earn less than men by how much? Also here is a percentage. Women with covering the same role, the same level of seniority, how much less do women earn than men? Let's see the results. So yeah, it's we are earning 37% less than men. Even if we do the same job, we deliver the same things, we spend sometimes maybe more hours working, but yet we are earning less. I'm not sure why, but that's the reality, unfortunately. So maybe the next question will help us understand why. So the next question is, globally, what percentage of women are in senior decision-making positions? Maybe this question will help us understand why we're earning less than men. Okay, I think you got it. We can see the answer. You got it right. Only 29% of women are in senior decision-making positions. So that's maybe why also we are earning less. We are less power to decide also in these terms, and also in the built environment, still there is still a very much male-dominated field. And so that's why also cities in many cases are not designed consider the needs of women, because as we said before, not all men involved take the time to fully understand. They just assume to understand, but they don't take the time to fully understand what are the real needs of women of different age groups, identity, and so forth. So that's why we did this work. So we at least we're now there is no more excuse. Now the data are available, and also some ideas on how to make it happen. So let's now move to kind of a positive side. Let's try to let's focus now on the strategies that we identify in our publication, in our report. So as before, we identify 4 key strategies to address justice and equality, to create more just and equal cities. First one, extremely important, mainstreaming gender responsive planning and in the national laws and policies. This is very important. That has to come from the national government, not only from local authorities. Otherwise, in some cases, they cannot do much if there is not guidance or support from a national level. It's very important to support women participation in urban governance at all levels. You will see this also with Kim when she will present her part. But if women are not in a senior position or like in an urban planning team to decide what's the future of our cities, till the team involved has to make the effort to engage women in the design process while they trying to understand the context where they operate. So engage women, girls, different age groups in urban governance and in planning processes. There is a need to support the collection of gender disaggregated data, and also to protect women's rights to land and property. So also in this case, when we identify different benefits, not only for women, but for everyone. For instance, by creating laws and policies at the national level, we are actually placing a requirement to pursue gender equality objectives in city planning design. So that's why it's important to have guidance at national level. City leaders who mainstream gender inclusion across decision-making activities, they ensure that gender equality is perused across the organization and within the service delivery. And also collecting gender disaggregated data also enable decision makers to get a clear picture of the needs of groups and more so to design solutions in a more accurate and relevant way. And then also land tenure is very important. Like in Africa, only 1% of women own the property of the land where they live. And by actually improving land tenure gives women more control over their lives, over their assets, and also more options to decide where they want to live and with whom. Next slide, please. Some inspirational case studies from around the world. The first one is from Sweden, where in 2014 the government declared itself a feminist government with the aim of mainstreaming gender equality in its national and international decision making. So this is very important and has increased women representation in decision making and policies. The second example comes from Los Angeles, but there are also good case studies in other cities like Barcelona, for instance, where the city of Los Angeles started to use gender disaggregated data in decision making and planning. Also, the city of Barcelona, for instance, they use in the government is using gender and race data to ensure that public transport, cycling, walking routes are created to address different needs of different genders and age groups. The third case study is from Canada, where there is this organization which is called City for All Women Initiative. It's an initiative that basically is basically the digital platform that allows women to get information about the local authorities, how to vote, how to engage in governments, local authority in decision making, because sometimes that is a big barrier, because maybe the process is in place, can be also very inclusive, participatory, but if it's not properly shared and people don't know actually how to participate, who to engage with, even if the process is in place, it doesn't work. So it's very important if you know that this information is shared broadly and that everyone can have access to. The next slide, please. Health and well-being. Also, so health and well-being is the third theme, which we are considered as critical in our publication, because the built environment has a critical role in supporting and improving the health and well-being of women. In fact, it can provide for women-specific needs relating to physical and mental stability. It can also create, so it can really create distress and leads to disproportionate health risk if health and well-being is not properly addressed in the built environment. Let's use the Menti again. Some questions about health and well-being. So how many women globally do not have access to high quality, inclusive and safe toilets that meet their needs? So with this question we'll explain why in front of public toilets there is always a big queue. One of the reasons.
We've also, Sarah,
Okay.
already had a question or comment in the chat around how toilets can be improved to have more solid floor-to-ceiling walls and floor-to-ceiling doors, which I completely agree with. And also, if anyone's ever been to America and they have that weird toilet door gap thing, we certainly, I think, can improve on that in the UK.
Yeah, there are so many things. So let's see the answer. So 1 in 3 women globally do not have access to proper toilets and water facility across the globe. Of course, in some countries, like in Africa, for instance, the situation is even worse. But yeah, definitely the design of toilets, the availability of different toilets, and also, consider also the needs of specific needs of women or women with kids or pregnant is very, very important. So the next question, let's look at healthcare in the UK. What is the percentage of women which are not able to access healthcare services that they need in terms of location? Also like to, if you have a chance to put in the chat, what is the question that really, or the results that really impress you? Say, wow, I thought it was different. I didn't know that. It would be nice to hear from you. Maybe you're already doing it, but as I say, I cannot see the chat. But I really like to, if you can tell us what is the statistic, the data that really, really impressed you, that kind of open your eyes. So let's see the answer about this. Let's see if you. So is 60% correct of women in the UK are not able to access healthcare services, maybe because they're too far, they're not accessible from where they live. Next question, because I'm conscious of time. Well, globally, in many households, women and girls bear the responsibility of water in how, consider like the maximum is 10 households. How many? What is the kind of the proportion? Let's see the answers. So globally, women and girls bear the responsibility of water collection in 8 out of 10 households. Basically, most of the households are responsible for water collection. Of course, when we mainly, in countries like Africa, for instance, or in where there is not like tap water or direct service in the house, so they have to go and collect with water in public water point, or sometimes also rivers, depends of course where you live. This maybe situation is not so relevant in the UK, but in other cities it is a problem, because it's taking a lot of time out of girls that they could use to go to school, to do other things. So they spend a lot of time going out there to fetch water, and sometimes also in situations that can be unsafe. So that's also an important issue to consider. So next question. In the UK, what percentage of homeless women have a physical health issue? So let's see the answer straight away. I think you all got it right, most of you. So yeah, it's 70% of homeless women with have a physical health issue. So let's move now to kind of a positive. Let's focus on what we can do to improve the situation. Also, in this case, we identify 4 strategies: creating inclusive, active, restorative public spaces in green areas. Nature, green spaces are so important. They don't have to stay out of the city. They have to be inside the city for many, many benefits, not only for women, but also for climate, for the planet. Increase access to physical and mental health care, nutrition facilities, enhance access to inclusive water, hygiene, and sanitation facilities. Now you know why. Provide adequate accommodations and housing models. Also in this case, many, many, many benefits, not only for women, but for everyone, about improving physical and mental health, to create like more active lifestyles, less stress, reduce also pressure on the existing health facilities, and so forth. So now I will take you through some of the examples. The first one is from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Penn State University in Pennsylvania, sorry, not Philadelphia, where they within the campus, the university created spaces for safe spaces for breastfeeding, for milk pumping, for students, and that is quite important, because there is in many cases, some bias or uncomfort from a cultural point of view to still is there to see a woman who is breastfeeding while it's totally normal. So it's very important to create spaces also for that particular need, and use maybe spaces, as a project we did in Brazil, to really use the design of the public space to also create awareness about the importance of breastfeeding when it's possible. At the same time, the importance of creating inclusion and respect for women who are breastfeeding. The second case is from Japan, where unfortunately women are more likely to commit suicide using the railway network more than men. And what the example there is that the government, they installed blue lighting, was implemented in 11 train stations to basically enable a calming effect. And this resulted in 80% decrease in suicide by all gender between 2000 and 2010, compared to the other stations which were studied without the blue lighting. And this is a good example to show how small interventions like changing the type of light actually has a huge impact on women and men well-being. So it's not rocket science. This intervention is really small, low-cost intervention in some cases, but it's important to do them and to know the benefits that they create. The third one is from London, where there is a lesbian co-housing collective that was created to support the design of housing spaces, also looking at the specific needs of older lesbian women. I will move now to the next and final theme, because I'm conscious of time. So maybe in this case, if you agree, maybe we don't do, what do you think, Kim? Shall we do this, the poll, or I just go through the statistics?
Let's do the poll, but we'll if people can have fast fingers, we'll go through it quickly.
Okay. Okay, so let's start with the first one. Maybe just to when we talk about enrichment fulfillment. Well, let's move to the question. What percentage of status across the globe represent women? What do you think is the percentage?
I think people are clocking onto the theme here.
Yeah. So you were right. Only 2 to 3% of statues, monuments, plaza, squares around the world, they are named after a woman. All the rest are named after an event, a war, a man, a dog, but not but not women, unfortunately. Next question. And what about London? What percentage of streets in London are named after women? A bit more pessimistic. Let's see the answer, which is 27.5%. So a bit better than what you thought, but still a long way to improve that. Next question. In the UK, what percentage of women work in science, technology, engineering, and maths professions? Okay, so let's see. The answer is 14.4%. So also when we talk about STEM, that's also the field where Kim, myself, and Jessa are working, and also some of you in terms of work, so urban planning, architecture, engineering. So next question. In the UK, how many women have had their drink spiked on a night out? Let's see the answer. It's, yeah, 1 eye out of 9. Yeah, you all got it right. So now let's move to the strategies to identify. But before, telling you about the strategy we identify, just to explain why we think enrichment and fulfillment is important. Because we think that the stories that our cities, the narrative that our cities tell in our streets, in our public space, is very important, because it's the way we kind of they affect our experience on how we feel like empower or we recognize in the space when we move around. The types of spaces, the facilities, the events city provide, also the type of narrative that they promote. They can help us or they can hinder women as they seek to fulfill their own potential and also to achieve a meaningful and rewarding life. So this element of enrichment and fulfillment, this aspect, which is normally overlooked in city planning design, is very important. So what we identify like 4 strategies, first of all, to provide accessible, inclusive workplaces and schools. And when we talk about schools, also educational programs for women, for girls, to support their personal and professional development. It's very important to design for diverse and flexible use of public spaces. So intergenerational spaces are very important. Provide safe and inclusive leisure and cultural spaces, and also use the built environment to uplift women and recognize their history and their stories. So this is also very important. Let's look at the some of the case studies that we identified. So the first one is from the US. As we said, the built environment, the construction industry is very much male dominated. So as a result, in many cases, also the construction sites are very much male dominated in terms of also the facilities or equipment that they provide, in terms of lack of toilets, or in terms of having the boots too big or the clothes too big that are not, available for women's size. So these things matters. And so what they did in the US, basically they created a kind of a toolkit with a specific protocol on how to equip these construction sites. The second example comes from the US, which I also like it quite a lot because it's a different way of telling the story of a city. In fact, they created this tribute garden in New York, which is a green space which was designed to raise awareness and also to pay respect to the victims of domestic abuse. There are so many squares, streets which are named after fascist, for instance, events, and not so many squares or cities in cities which actually create awareness about violence or domestic abuse, like domestic abuse. So I think it's a good example. The third example is about the 50-minute city approach, which is about creating neighborhoods where people have better access to facilities and services. And this is particularly important for women because in many cases, women also have the responsibility to take care of children in the family, and so and to work at the same time. So the fact of having better access to facility, to services, to shopping area, to have everything nearby makes their life easier in terms of also time that they normally otherwise have to consume, to use to go shopping or to go to the park or to go to, I don't know, to health facility. So this proximity is the proximity of service and facility is very important. So I will now hand over to Kim, because with my presentation, I really wanted to give you like the breadth of just an idea, actually, of the breadth of evidence and case studies that we managed to collect for this publication. But as I said at the beginning, in addition of creating evidence and identifying strategies and actions, we also wanted to create an actionable approach that you can start using today. And so Kim will show you like 2 strategies that we identify on how to make this change happen. So hand over to you, Kim. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. And I'm going to close the chat down on my screen because I'm getting very absorbed into the conversation. So thank you. Yeah, the way Sarah said, she set out the strategies, challenges, strategies and actions underneath those themes. So the way we'd like you to use the publication, which again is free, it's open source, it's on our website. If you've got a particular challenge within a particular theme, please do dip into that chapter and see what we've had to say about it and some of the solutions that we've suggested. But there are some specific things you can be doing. And I did notice in the chat some questions at the start around the role of local authorities and what you can be doing in the local plan. So hopefully I'll pick up on those bits now. And as Sarah said right at the start, and I saw again the comment in the chat, it's really important that we have an integrated and gender responsive participatory approach to city making. And it's only through doing that that we can tackle the breadth of issues that we do experience across the world. And what this really, really needs is a commitment, a firm commitment and collaboration from public and private sector partners and stakeholders who really need to work together to break down those discipline silos, to develop joint, well-crafted and context-relevant physical interventions, coupled with governance, social and behavioural change programmes. It's siloed thinking that I think we're still having this conversation around gender inclusion in 2023, and the failure to sort of break down those barriers and not adopt an integrated approach means that we won't be able to deliver gender equity, and actually silo thinking can make things a lot worse. So if you move on to the next slide, please, Jess. Thank you. The 2 tools that I will talk you through are the Gender Responsive Project Foundations and the Gender Responsive Project Roadmap. Next slide, please. Thank you, Jess. Okay. So again, this is in our publication, and what we'd like you to do is look to the left-hand side of the screen and see which stakeholder icon you relate to. And then we have set out on the right-hand side these gender responsive project foundations. So these are all suggestions that we think multi-stakeholders within a city should be adopting to help create the right environment for gender inclusion to be delivered in your cities. And I did see a comment in the chat, but somebody was absolutely right. If you design cities for women, you're designing cities by default for the needs of everyone. That's intersectional women, for the needs of all genders. So women are a fantastic sort of common denominator when we are designing spaces. But the first thing we have to do, so our foundation one, is conduct a women's local needs analysis. So we've talked a lot about data, and how lots of data isn't gender disaggregated, and lots of data doesn't actually reflect the needs of women. When we do consult and engage, often it isn't women whose voices are heard and reflected and who have the time to respond. So we need to really, in my opinion, start from scratch and conduct those local needs analyses, really doing a great deal of detailed stakeholder engagement targeted based on your demographic data of your location. And really making sure you've got a great understanding of the challenges with women within your location. That means that any decision taken from then is being informed. Foundation 2 is that we need to produce this gender responsive city action plan. Sorry, the comment chats keep popping up on my screen. Oh, and again, the gender responsive city action plan. So that is coming up with ideas for how you will actually address the needs of women based on that local action plan. Foundation 3 is the gender responsive city pledge. So commitments from all stakeholders to trying to make your location much more equitable and inclusive for all people. And it's a commitment as well to delivering on your action plan. Foundation 4 is this multi-stakeholder, cross-stakeholder task force that we would like people to establish, truly focused on everybody's responsibility and role in delivering on the action plan. Again, breaking down those silos, showing that it's everybody's problem as everyone has a role in the solution. Local authorities, as we've discussed in the chat, are really struggling with finances. This isn't just a local authority issue, this is everyone's problem. Foundation 5, hopefully a really quick win. We can all be appointing a champion for gender responsive planning, placemaking within our organisations, somebody who has influence and somebody whose role it really is to drive forward this agenda. Foundation 6 and Foundation 7 talk about gender responsive project procurement mechanisms and project financing. So really looking at where the money is going within your organisations, and is it going to a diverse range of businesses and organisations, or is it just going to the same familiar groups of people, which predominantly is white men, which is fine. They have businesses, they need to make money just as much as anyone else, but we need to be giving that money out proportionately and in an equitable way as well, not just to one stakeholder group. Foundation 8 is about looking beyond the development boundary. So if you are doing a physical intervention, a new building, a new public realm, what we often do, and myself as a planner, we have these virtual red lines, don't we, around a building or a place, and our scheme can be the best, most inclusive, equitable scheme within that red line boundary, with the best lighting and benches and breast and chest feeding facilities. You step outside that virtual line and things can be a lot worse. And what we know again about lighting in particular is it's those stark contrasts between good lighting and dark lighting that cause people to be uncomfortable. So truly working with your development boundary neighbour to make sure that there's a nice smooth transition. Foundation 9 is some guidance around construction sites. So this isn't just about the fact that construction sites are predominantly male dominated spaces, often can be seen as hostile or uncomfortable for women. There is some recommendations in this publication, actually I'll come on to them next, about education within construction, but this is also about how you consider the use of temporary spaces. So I'm working with the London Legacy Development Corporation at the moment, who have an awful lot of temporary spaces, to develop some guidance for them on how they can make it safer, more inclusive, more equitable for women. So things like big hoarding barriers which ruin sight lines. There's no passive surveillance because there's not much going on there. At night time, lighting is bad. Often there's litter and rubbish. Often the hoarding comes over the pavement, so people can't access safe pedestrian pathways. So some guidance that your local authority can put out stipulating how construction sites should be managed. Foundation 10 is to educate and upskill professionals in gender responsive planning. Really important, something myself, Sarah and Jess are real advocates for, really getting this on the agenda. We're talking to a lot of planning schools as well about including it in their curriculum. Foundation 11, I haven't missed one, have I? No, Foundation 11, advocate for gender responsive planning policy reform. So if you are a local authority on the call with influence in this space, there's certainly a lot that you can be doing. Again, we'll come on to it in the project life cycle. But again, as Eric, we're also trying to lobby Westminster to make sure that this is included within a requirement for a local plan, so that anyone that is a developer or putting forward a planning application has to set out how they have designed and considered and consulted women, which would just be phenomenal, because unfortunately we know this is the right thing, and unless it's stipulated in law and policy, sometimes it's a nice to have, not a need to have, which is really unfortunate. So it does need policy change, I believe, as well. And then Foundation 12 is to ensure that diverse voices and experiences are heard when shaping projects. So ideally that's through having a diverse project team, but not always possible. We've talked about how women are often less represented within these professions. And if that isn't possible, really committing to how you're doing stakeholder engagement, doing an equalities impact assessment of your engagement methods, for example, understanding your local demographics, trying to get a proportionate response when you're doing engagement, making sure you've got some play facilities within an engagement event, that they're accessible, they're by public transport, all that sort of stuff. Really, really important around stakeholder engagement. So, sorry if I'm talking fast because of time. All of those things are in the publication. Really important. Please do take it and start applying them. And hopefully, if we can all do that, as I said, we create this really nice environment within a local authority, within a city or urban environment, for projects to come forward in a more gender equitable way. Next slide, please, Jess. Right. The next thing that we've got is this gender responsive project lifecycle. Just flip in the book to that page. Yep. Okay. And this is something that we would love you, and if you do it, please come and feedback to us and let us know how you've gotten on. But please do take this and start applying it to any of your projects. So this is whether you've got a policy strategy or policy or physical intervention. There is a step 3 that says planning application in the book that I've got. The printed version, it says asterisk if required. So this can be applied to any different type of project. So if you're a project manager, a team leader, please do start using this. Next slide, Jess. Thank you. Okay, so this takes us through all the stages of a project, from project inception through to implementation and monitoring. And I won't pick up on all of these things purely because of time. But some of I'll do my personal favourites if you'll indulge me. So in project inception, it's really important that you understand the local needs of women and the intersectional challenges that they face. We've talked about a local needs assessment at like a city or an urban scale, but you can still do that on every single project individually, even if you're not in that sort of more strategic governance role. Something we absolutely love to do at Arab is this thing called an inclusion moment. So you might be familiar with like a health and safety moment on projects, but an inclusion moment is 5 minutes at the start of every project where we talk about an inclusion topic, whether or not the project is about anything to do with inclusion at all. So it provides this space where we can have these conversations, where we can educate each other. And it sets a culture within the project team around equity and inclusion. We really, really enjoy them. And something that I'm a big advocate for is about creating an environment within your project teams where you can have difficult conversations. I think topics about equity and inclusion, the language, the terminology, it's always shifting. People can feel uncomfortable because they don't want to offend anybody. Having an inclusion moment where you have those conversations and create that environment culture within your team is really important. Project brief, really important to identify gender responsive project outcomes. So how is your project going to impact on the needs of women at the end of the project? Somebody in the chat talked about, was it lighting provision you were talking about? So how would the local authorities' new policy on alternate lighting rationing ultimately impact women? If that assessment would have been done, that would have maybe shown them that it wasn't a great idea. So really identifying those outcomes, making sure all the people on the team are aware of how those, what those outcomes are and their role in delivering those outcomes. I've talked there about a mix of engagement methods. A gender responsive engagement plan is really important. In project design, if you've got multiple options or you're doing an options appraisal, really making sure you've got this multi-criteria assessment tool with one of those criteria relating to gender, or at least one of those criteria relating to gender. And if you have team changes, really important that you onboard them properly. You teach them about the project culture and what the outcomes are expected. Planning application, if it is a development project, what we'd love to start seeing is local authorities requiring developers to have considered how their scheme impacts on women. There's a few ways you can do this. One of the ways is through requiring a section within your design and access statement to stipulate exactly how women have been considered as part of the design. And you could also, in your statement of community involvement, have a section where you require them to set out exactly how they've engaged with women, how that relates to the percentage of women within the local area. Next slide, please, Jess. Oh, and you can consider as well spending your Section 106 money on statues of women. That'd be really good. Looking at procurement, making sure that your procurement mechanisms are gender responsive, your assessment criteria for how you procure your requirements, have you considered how they impact on women or whether or not they restrict women from applying? And maybe your assessment criteria as well needs to consider how women are treated, well, how certain women criteria like women-owned businesses or the number of businesses that have gender equitable policies and procedures, for example, can all be looked at in procurement. In implementation, risk registers, please have a standing risk about the experiences of women in the project. And also if you have design changes, which we all know are often, well, quite common, value engineering takes place, doesn't it? Things change on a project. Any changes need to go back and reassess it against the original project outcomes and exactly how that impacts women and the outcomes. And then measuring success, we do have in the publication a whole list of KPIs that you're very welcome to start using, but truly understanding whether your project has had the intended outcomes that you wanted. So next slide, please, Jess, and I'm close to wrapping up. So just to share that we've had a phenomenal amount of interest since we published. We've had 66 articles globally. We've been in Forbes magazine, over 1.3 million impressions on Twitter. Our colleagues who were part of this from the University of Liverpool presented at a conference in China, which had 1 million people on the call, which is pretty intimidating. We spoke to the Global Mayors Parliament. They asked for us to come and speak to them. It's an important priority for them. Yesterday, myself and Sarah spoke at an event for the United Nations across Europe. And it's been at MIPIN and UK Reef as well. So I don't think this is a topic that is going away. And I think it's a topic that we all need to start prioritising urgently. Last slide, Jess, thanks. So just to say that this is very much the beginning of what we want to achieve as ARUP, and we're really hoping that by sharing it with you, you'll join us on this hopeful, amazing journey of making our cities better and more equitable for all people. I think what's important to note is that if we're going to solve some of the really key challenges that we have globally around climate change and resilience, about productivity, if we're going to meet the UN SDGs, we absolutely can't be forgetting 50% of the population. If women don't feel safe to use public transport, how are we possibly going to meet our carbon targets? Lots of the topics that we talked about are completely interlinked. We can't just focus on one, safety and security in isolation. We need to be looking at everything holistically. We're really excited about the next steps for this. I hope you are as well. There are certainly things that we can be empowered to be delivering and empowered to make change, and that's what we hope we achieve, really. So thank you. I've left a little bit of time, Homes England colleagues, I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. The chat has been absolutely amazing, really, really positive about the work that you've done, but also the statistics are really alarming for people. You know, obviously people on this call have got a kind of good understanding of this topic, and that's why they've joined the call. But those early statistics that you showed has really made people like quite worried and like quite emotional about this subject. My reflection is that as a woman, we almost subconsciously live in a built environment in a different way to men to stay safe. It's what we do. We don't even think about it anymore. It's just kind of, you know, how we live our lives. Lisa, you can share our slides to do the Q&A. Just a couple of questions, and then we'll move on, because I know you're going to kind of do a summary of some of the questions, aren't you, for us? One question which I don't think we've covered, because a lot of the questions that came up you covered in the chat. But one of the things was, do you think that women, through public sector changes like the removal of the guards from trains, are deliberately being designed out of full public participation?
I would like to think no. My personal view is that we've just not considered how that policy or procedure would impact on women. It's just not even been a thought process. We've seen it in areas that have introduced clean air zones, where older taxis haven't been able to drive right into a city centre, so women have had to walk from their location to outside, and have risked experiencing and have experienced sexual assault and harassment in that process. And that was a lack of consideration of knock-on impacts of introducing a certain policy. It's just not as well. They should have used our project lifecycle, Claire, and really defined their project outcomes from the beginning and looked at understanding impacts when they did their options assessment. I'd like to think it wasn't a targeted decision at all. I think it's more a lack of consideration, personally.
There are a couple of comments where people are keen to share with you their experience as well, so where you've asked for examples, so we can share your details for how to get in touch with you, with people as well. But also it would be great if all of the publications that you've mentioned today, we can send that out as well, because people are asking for them in the chat. But really, really challenging and insightful session, so thank you both so much for us. Lisa, do you want to kind of share what we're going to do next with our slides? So we've got these take-home messages that we will send out to you. I won't go through them today, but this is kind of like the one-pager of what we've learned today and what we can do differently. So that will come out to everyone in the slide deck. Can we just go to the next slide, please, Lisa? Okay, so as Homes England, as a government agency, we have got a huge amount of resource to share with you for us to build a better built environment. At the moment, it's in all kind of different places, and what we're going to do is we're going to launch a hub in the autumn to have kind of like a one-stop shop, so that you can access the winter learning programme, the summer learning programme, and all the other resources that we've got as well. And then finally, the last slide, and we are right on time. Amazing. Just to say thank you so much for our presenters for giving us so much to go away and thinking about. Absolutely brilliant. For everyone in the local government capacity centre who has supported this and made it happen, and also for everyone who signed up, who's been challenged, who's participated, and who has added to the chat. We'll be in touch and we'll send out all the resources that you need, but please do get in touch with us on the email address that's on the screen now if there's anything else that we can do for you. Thank you.